to the cloud. Right. So welcome everyone who's joining online in the Zoom or offline here. So we have 1,000 people in the room. So yeah, before we start, I think we can get to know each other. So people on the Zoom, you can input in the chat box your name, where you come from, fun fact about yourself, and probably here as well. People who are coming offline, there are how many? 10 of us so far. Yeah, probably we can start by introducing each other so we can call each other better. So start from Alsha. Introduce yourself. What are you doing here? Are you a student or like an intelligence officer? Please.
Hi, everybody. It's Alsha Feda. I'm what? Okay, sorry. I did an MA in Islamic Studies, and I'm also part of the group of people that's founding the Construction Indonesia. So, nice meeting you all.
This is the mic.
Oh, okay.
This is the mic.
Hey everyone.
Yeah, just put it here.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Nas. I'm doing MA in International Relations at NYU. And yeah, I've been friends with all of these guys for a while, so I'm just supporting them.
Oh wow! You don't want to deconstruct Indonesia and the origin of nationalism?
No.
Wow. Okay,
Okay.
I see how it is.
Hi everyone, I'm Gary. I'm doing master in college. In computer. Nice.
Hello, guys. My name is Kay. I'm studying MA statistics here at the university. I'm interested in critical theory and possibilities for grid politics today. And I found this event through iHubs and Pasta. So
And hi everyone, my name is Jonathan. I'm doing my master's at Columbia as well, and I found out through that I have to get also.
Hi, I'm Frank. I'm a student here. I found out about this event through my girlfriend who is a student here. And she is in the nation, so I'm trying to get brownie points with that if I win more.
Oh, yeah. Hello, I'm Tabasco. I am a friend of the Eric's. That's it.
That's the fun part.
But hello everyone, my name is Amana. I'm not a student here as well. My wife is studying here, so yeah. That's why I'm here. Yeah, and I love studying.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, Nathan, I'm Derek's assistant throughout this entire project. Is it unmuted? Yeah.
It's unmuted.
And this is Derek. So probably before we start, Derek, please tell us about how you were introduced to like Indonesian intellectual history.
Oh wow.
The first time and what makes you like interested in it.
Okay, right. Sorry guys, this was a bit off script, but let's do this. I think for me, I was a history major in undergrad. And I always liked history, and especially something I learned in history is that it's always nice to go to actually the primary sources. Like if you're learning about a person or a time period, you're not, instead of just reading secondhand accounts of it, you want these people to kind of speak for themselves. And that's how I sort of started. And now I'm in the embarrassing position of like talking more than everyone else from this talk show. I feel like a narcissist. I'm gonna stop. Nathan, thank you. I hope you all enjoyed this.
Prepare for your hard questions today.
What Nathan said, yeah. Can we make sure that we have a mic on facing the audience? So like if anyone has questions, we can.
After we are muted.
It's okay, you can just turn it on. So like in case like someone wants to interrupt in the middle or not. No, I think if you just turn on the mic, it should be fine.
Hi, is it echoing or it's all good? People in the Zoom?
Are we good?
All good. Can you hear me?
Sorry about this. We're just
All good, all
just-
good. Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Bernadette. And also nice to hear from Ignatius. Love our history fans. So okay, let's just get started. Okay, so welcome back, and to everyone who's a newcomer, thanks for coming. I hope we can keep you coming. So last week we kind of just introduced ourselves and like what we're trying to do with this class. Again, all of that is up on YouTube. You can just go to our website. Actually, I'll take you on to our website again. So a few housekeeping stuff before we start today, because there was a bit of confusion about this earlier in the week. So we do have readings, and if you're in the WhatsApp group, we will post the readings on the WhatsApp group, and they're completely optional. The idea is just to get people in the right headspace. So once you actually show up, it's like, oh, I can kind of see what's going on. This is sort of resonating with me more. But it's completely optional. And the way we're gonna try to do it is like usually we'll try to post it before the weekend. So maybe the Thursday and Friday after the class, we'll post it. And if you missed it on the WhatsApp group, we'll have it on the website as well. We have links, you can just click on it and we can access it. The other thing I want to mention, and I feel like I have an obligation to say it, I mentioned rendang last week. And so anyone based in New York, if you're either Indonesian and you miss rendang, or you're not Indonesian and you want to try rendang, there's a Bangladeshi restaurant in the East Village. It's called Utshop. I know it's Bangladeshi, it's not Indonesian, but they have this black beef. It tastes and looks like rendang. Gading's tried it. He can attest to it. Yeah, it actually tastes like rendang. So again, people based in New York, go to Utshop. I think that's the okay. So today we'll be starting with our first module and our first course in it, which is on nationalism. And let me actually, because I didn't actually really do this last week, let me actually walk you guys through sort of our plan for the next 8 to 10 weeks, which will encompass our first module on nationalism. And the way maybe the way we want to approach this is sort of, I haven't. Oh shoot, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. Can you all see this right now? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, so again, it's our website. You can join the WhatsApp group here, and all of our past sessions are all going to be up on YouTube. Okay, so part one. So the way you want to think about this is sort of we're trying to kind of follow the spiritual journey of nationalism, or Indonesian nationalism in particular, and see how it sort of like slowly evolves and sort of kind of makes its way into the world. And so first we'll start with its origins that aren't necessarily in Indonesia itself. Nationalism is a global and modern phenomenon. Indonesia is not the only nation state in the world. And so first we start, and that's today, we'll start with sort of the origin story of nationalism. How did it come about? What changes made it possible? And then we start with Indonesia itself. And I'd like to make the argument that sort of nationalism, the idea that even sort of this impulse to sort of think of this idea of a new nation, this Indonesia, was sort of born of an identity crisis. And this was an identity crisis that was precipitated by Dutch rule. And in this section, we'll actually look at works of literature. We'll be talking about Pramudia Anantatur, Mara Rusli, some of Indonesia's biggest writers, to sort of like try to get what this experience was psychologically. What was this identity crisis? What were these people feeling to make them sort of kind of imagine this idea of Indonesia? And then once this idea emerges, we follow its development. We first look at, and to do this, we turn to the works of Sukarno. Sukarno, Indonesia's first president, and sort of like the nationalist ideologue par excellence. And we follow his argument. And first part of his argument revolves around the Dutch colonial system itself. Why is this such a bad thing? And so we'll talk about that here. And then finally, we sort of get to Sukarno's own exposition of what it meant to be Indonesian. What was this Indonesian identity and why was it so necessary? And then we'll have a bit of an intermezzo. We'll have a guest speaker. I think we've just confirmed it's Peter. So Peter Carey, he's a British historian. He focuses on the Java War. Yeah. Especially Prince Diponegoro. And he's going to come in and he's going to give a talk about this. And that's sort of going to cover, it's going to overlap with what we're going to be talking about in these two classes. So sure to come for that. And then finally, now that we've sort of constructed this idea of Indonesia and Indonesian nationalism, we try to see how it worked in practice. The idea steps into the world. And now, what does it do that it's out in the world? And we find that it's complicated. You can have these ideals, you can have these very neat formulations in your head of what it means to be Indonesian. Once it encounters the real world, it's not that simple anymore. And so we first start with the grassroots, the masses. Everything we've been talking about so far has only been in the eyes of a very narrow, educated elite. What did it feel like for most Indonesians who were illiterate, who didn't go to Dutch schools, who had no idea of this cultural landscape that people like Sukarno inhabited? How did they experience the revolution? We'll start first with that. And then we'll talk about the experience of the revolution itself and how some people saw this as this powerful reviving force. Revolution is something that wakes Indonesia out of its slumber and brings it into a new world. And then there's some people who see that and are kind of like, this is dangerous. I don't know if we want a lot of this. Revolution is scary. So we'll actually talk about these debates later. And then finally, we go into the issue of unity. Nationalism is envisioned as this inherently unifying force. But as we'll see as we move on with the next modules, there was a lot of division within this movement. One was ideological. You have political Islam, you have Marxism, and all of these strains didn't always cooperate with each other. You also had division in terms of regional identities between the islands of Java and Sumatra and Sulawesi, and sort of which would be dominant in this new nation state. But we'll talk more about that in the other modules. To conclude the first module, we'll just we'll focus on sort of what we call here sort of the most distant frontier of Indonesian nationalism, sort of the people who always fit in uneasily into this framework of what it meant to be Indonesian. And we'll talk about when we're talking about the minorities here, the Arabs and the Chinese. So I'll be covering most of these sections, and then Brian's gonna take over for the final one. And then we'll finally transition to our module on indigenous knowledge, which Nathan and Christine are gonna cover. We also have another guest speaker potentially planned after this. So we haven't confirmed that, so we won't talk about that anymore. But so that's sort of the game plan. Don't stress about that too much. I just kind of wanted to give like a brief preview, sort of where we're trying to go. So first we construct the idea of Indonesia, we see why it's important, and then we sort of start complicating the story by seeing how it plays out in the real world. So let's start with the actual stuff for today, which is on nationalism. And sorry, which one? Oh, this. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I am. Wait, sorry. Okay, okay. Are we good? Perfect. Okay, so nationalism. Let's start by thinking about nationalism in terms of identity, and like kind of like get this in your heads: identity. And to help us sort of digest this, Nathan has very generously volunteered himself to sort of share his own identity with us. And you projecting. I'm not. So let's talk about Nathan for a bit. And people who actually know Nathan can comment on whether this is accurate or not. I ran this through him. He tells me I'm projecting. He approved this list. I don't know what he's talking about. So Nathan is many, many things. Like when you ask people, who is Nathaniel Pribadi? If you believe in biological age and generations, you'll say he's a millennial. If you believe in the science of the stars, Nathan is a Taurus. He's also an alcoholic. Nathan is a big fan of whiskey. His favorite GIF on WhatsApp is of a bottle saying, what are you going to do tonight? He's an alcoholic. Nathan is also a Calvinist. He is, that's a denomination of Christianity. And Nathan specifically asked me to put the anti here. I'm not really going to talk about that. You can ask Nathan yourself. I don't want to get him into trouble. Nathan's also a progressive activist. And finally, he is an Indonesian. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And the reason why I kind of wanted to do it, or why I wanted to do this, aside from like having people get to know Nathan better, is that notice how being Indonesian coexists with other facets of Nathan's identity, right? And some of them, Nathan didn't really have a choice. Like his parents, were they Calvinists? Yeah, okay. His parents were Calvinists. They sent him to Calvinist school. He didn't have a say in the matter. So he's a Calvinist. But he did have a choice in putting the word anti here. So I want to, and again, identity is this sort of, it's layered. It exists, it coexists with other versions of itself. And sometimes we have a choice in it and sometimes we don't. So I want to think of nationalism as just one part of identity, one version of identity. So let's try to unpack what it means to be Indonesian, what it means to have a national identity, what is all that about? And so to do that, we're going to start with a bunch of maps, and all these are pre-modern. So on the left, you have a map by Heinrich Bunting. So this is Christian Europe's vision of the world, I guess, exposed in map form. And on the right, this is a pilgrimage map from Lanna. Lanna is sort of this old kingdom that I think today corresponds to northern Thailand. It's a pilgrimage map, and so let's try to take a closer look. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to comment on these. They're clearly very different from the maps we're used to. Anyone wants to say, not the worst Google map. Yeah, does anyone want to weigh in?
There's a center.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but on the map on the left, this circle here, it says Jerusalem. Yeah. And so obviously this is Christian Europe, so it makes sense how that would be placed there. And the same thing for the Lanna map over here. This is sort of a pilgrimage map. So this represents all the different pilgrimage sites you'd make as a Buddhist in this period. And then at the center here would be like the center of the pilgrimage, where you start or where you end, I think. But yeah, absolutely, there is a center. Anything else anyone wants to sort of point out? Any comments? It's okay to say no.
I think they want to make it symmetrical as well.
I
There's like a composition.
I didn't notice that, but yeah, I think that's sort of, maybe that lines up with this idea of having a center, right? That the world isn't just
Evolving.
It's not just revolving around you, but it's so well ordered. It's so symmetric. Like if you I guess that's why it's the worst Google map, because an actual map on Google has a lot of rough edges, right? All these continents are kind of janky. There's no geometric perfection, but here everything seems so ordered, so rational almost.
It's
Okay.
interesting who became like the ones set aside, the one on the borders.
America,
Yeah,
yeah. It's in.
I was just wondering, like,
That's a good question. Well, actually, there's England over here, I think. I guess Europeans don't really like. Yeah, Brexit before Brexit. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what this is. I don't speak Latin. I'm guessing it might be Denmark. I don't know. It's yeah, but yeah. Sorry.
South America says the New World.
Yeah, so that's probably part of it. Like this is the age of exploration. They're just coming out. It's like, oh, what's this new landmass? So yeah.
Read the top, something gigantic.
Oh, perfect.
Ibna, maybe? And that's interesting. It's what are these which if you look these little clovers, yeah.
Oh,
And I
Ireland.
think it may say Kleeblatt, which would kind of make sense from the shape. But I can't really read the rest of it.
Wow.
So Kleeblatt means clover.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually what that word says. It's kind of difficult to read.
It's okay. We gave it a shot.
But yeah, world in a over, etc. Something I can't read.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's the gist of it. Let's sort of move on to a next map. This one's slightly closer to reality. So this is a map from the Ming Empire in China from 14th and 15th centuries. Before I do repeat this whole exercise of, well, what do you think? Ignore the white blocks. I think these were the names of like counties and cities, and they just sort of covered it. So yeah, anyone wants to sort of weigh in again? Anything that's striking about this? Or maybe even like how this differs? It's a good one. Yeah. So the middle part is China. And I think here this might be Korea and Japan on the east. And to the west, this is not sure, but I think it might be the rest of the world west of China. Yeah. But sorry?
It's all landlocked.
It's all, yeah, I guess, especially up north there, where this is literally just, there's nothing above it. Yeah. Also, it's centered again. Even if you're trying to represent reality, it's sort of, oh, the white dots. Yeah. So I think these are a bunch of like cities and counties in China. And then for some reason, they kind of just blotted it out. I'm not sure why. But I think those are what the white dots are. But yeah, no, it's centered again. And so that sort of theme repeats itself. Although here the center is, as befits a map drawn by a Chinese imperial cartographer, the center is China itself. And just to put more context to this, China's own name for itself is Zhongguo. Zhongguo means the middle kingdom. We are at the center. This is the kingdom at the center of the world, essentially. Any way this differs from a modern map, aside from the fact that it's not sort of actually, it doesn't even try to be proportionate to like actual land masses. Let me give you a hint for the next one. Another old map to the left, and this is a vanilla one. Google Images. Rivers are more pronounced. Are they more pronounced? That's true. I didn't notice that. But as the rivers are more pronounced.
Maybe like there's less distinction, I guess.
In here.
So the left one is like less distinct than the right one. Like I guess there's like much more separation. Things like there's not really, I mean, as many borders as I can tell.
Yeah, and that's the key thing we're gonna get into. The fact that there are no borders, and there have been no borders at all in these maps. That's kind of with Africa, Europe, and Asia, and so this is sort of my sort of force of getting into nationalism, the idea that you take a landmass, you draw lines on it, and you say, this is a country. We didn't do that before, I don't know, 17th, 18th centuries. This is a very modern thing that we're doing. This idea that you can like visualize an actual illustrative space. You draw lines and you're like, this is mine. This is where I'm from. This is where you're from. So how did this happen? How did we sort of get here? So to help us understand that, most of today we'll be focusing on this book by Benedict Anderson, Imagining Communities. It's sort of like one of the big seminal texts on nationalism. And it's not the only one. There are several. Like Ernest Gellner, who I quoted here, also wrote his own text. So why do we focus on Benedict Anderson? Well, it's the only one I've read, so that's one reason. The second one is Imagine Communities focuses much more on the cultural experience of nationalism and its formation compared to other books. And in some sense, it focuses on this subjective experience of what does it feel to be part of a nation? How did people come to feel that? Again, remember Nathan, not just a tourist, not just an activist, but Indonesian. How did they even imagine that in the first place? And to contrast that, you have Gellner. Gellner's book is much more structural. It's much more mechanistic, where Gellner's argument was essentially that, oh, nations had to form because of specific economic needs of capitalism. And that's a very different kind of argument from what Anderson is making, where it's like, how did people come to feel this emotional bond? And you can sort of see from the quote I have up here and the title itself that it's almost like there's something artificial, right? Or at least that nations are not primordial because you sort of have to imagine them. But there's an action before like the formation of the nations themselves. So let's get into that. So let's try to break down the word imagined communities itself first. And let's start with like communities themselves. What are communities? And a bunch of basic examples that we have here. Your family, right? That's a community. Your friends, your cliques, those are also communities. And then, all sorts of like, groupings that you form with people. You go to the gym, your regular gym buddies, that's kind of a community. URIS 330, Deconstructing Indonesia. If you guys come here regularly, you guys get to know each other. That is also kind of a community, right? What do all of them have in common? You actually know everyone. You know everyone in your family. If you have a healthy friend group, hopefully you know everyone as well. And same with all of these like shared activities. But there are also communities where you don't actually know everyone who's part of it. We're Indonesian. It's a country of what? 260, 270, 180, 85, 185 million people. I'm never going to meet 95% or even 99% of these people. And yet somehow I can imagine that we're part of the same community. And it's not just nationalism. It's not just national identity that's imagined. For example, BTS Army, right? And how do you know? The moment, if you ever get on Twitter and you attack anyone from BTS and these people gang up on you, they don't know each other, but they're ganging up on you. Yeah. That's how you know these guys are part of a community. They clearly define themselves by BTS. There are religious communities too, right? And here I'm using specifically the example of the Islamic Ummah, and the word Ummah itself means community. And in Indonesian, Umat Islam. And there's also geographical communities, and it's the same. You might identify as a New Yorker or a Jakarta, and you don't meet anyone, and not anyone. You don't know everyone in this locale, and yet you know that you're part of a community. You know that you don't like people from New Jersey as a New Yorker, right? And that's sort of how does this happen? How do you come to build these imaginary ties? And so for Ben Anderson, there are three different sort of mechanisms, the way we do it. And first is time, language, and shared spaces and experiences. And I want to stress like one of Ben's claims is that for most of human history, we focused on these other kinds of imagined communities. We sort of saw ourselves as Muslims, as Christians, or whatever. I mean, it's only in the 18th century that we started seeing ourselves as part of a nation. So how did that happen? So I'm going to start with time, and I have to apologize in advance because time, we're going to get a bit abstract. We're going to get a bit philosophical, but I promise you, we can get through it together. It's not too bad. So before we start talking about time, I just have a bunch of questions to sort of get our brains going and start thinking about time in a more nuanced way. Because again, what is time really? And I mean, you don't have to answer that. That's a philosophy. This is. But 3 questions that I want to focus on. What is, and first one, this is the most important, is what is neutral time? And this is a concept that Benedict Anderson is going to deploy again and again. Neutral time, as opposed to what? How does time become neutral? How does time not become neutral? And then related to that, what moves through time? And if we can think of something that moves through time, is there something that doesn't? Something that exists outside of time? And again, with the maps, I'm going to throw it on to you guys. Any comments? Anyone want to take a stab at this? Yeah.
For me, these 3 questions seem to revolve around history and understanding of history, or maybe that's a possible answer. You know, if we think of Eurocentric history, we would argue that that is not neutral time, but it's a specific time perception, right? Whereas other parts of the world have other times or other histories.
Right.
And then this also kind of goes to the second and third question, where especially if we think of what moves outside of time, this kind of makes me think about secular or non-secular time, or secular and religious time.
Yeah.
Where religion, freedom is like positive at the end of time, outside of time. Maybe that's a possible approach.
Yeah, no, I think that actually gets to a lot of it, right? This idea that Eurocentric time, and I want to go back to the word that's used, centric, center. Remember the maps, center. So that's key. The fact that that's one way time does not become neutral. That time is sort of claimed by someone. That time belongs to someone. That time tells someone's story, but maybe not other people. Time tells a story. Anyone want to make a few more comments? Anyone else to say? Okay, we're good? Okay. So yeah, that's exactly it. Ben describes, names. Oh, okay. Names exist outside of time. Can you elaborate on that if you want to? Let me, wait, I don't know if it's,
talk?
he's
Is that
gonna
easier?
unmute this in case you wanna. Sorry.
I don't know. Can we? Can we talk?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I just meant names as in like family names, especially because whether or not a society is patrilineal or matrilineal, or whether or not you're remembered, the name doesn't get changed generally, whether you're alive or dead. So it doesn't necessarily mean much, but names stay outside of time, I would argue.
Yeah, thanks for that. So almost kind of like this idea of a primordial entity, right? Something that is gonna last forever. It maybe, to use your word of like Eurocentrism, something that lasts outside of the center, something that's universal and timeless. And I've sort of tried to look for like what people in philosophy discussion forums were saying about this, and what exists outside of time. One of the examples was God. God exists outside of time because again, he's always there, like a family name, maybe. I don't know if that's blasphemous to say, but anyway. So okay, so yeah, Ben Anderson describes the nation as a sociological organism, and it moves through time, and not just any kind of time that is homogeneous and empty. Again, to go back to what we were talking about, neutral time. So why is this neutral time so important? Why could nations not exist when time was not neutral? So let me try to get a bit more into this idea of neutral time. So imagine sort of a timeline. So I have 50 AD, 500 AD, and I have 3 events here. King is baptized, a war breaks out, and a priest is burned at the stake. And this is guilty of the sin of Eurocentrism, I'm aware. In neutral time, these are just events. These are just events that one happened in 60 AD, one happened in 200 AD, one happened in 400 AD. There's not necessarily any kind of connection. They just happened within time. But say you're a devout Christian. Say you believe that time reflects the Christian God's divine purpose. Time's no longer neutral. Time is now Christian. And you can link all of these events. the baptism of the king is somehow related to the fact that Jesus was baptized by Saint John. Saint John. Jesus was baptized by Saint John, and then a certain divine prophecy was set in motion, and that divine prophecy necessitated that this king got baptized. Same thing. Maybe this war breaks out. You can link it to this overarching divine purpose. Time is Christian. Time reflects what Christian divine providence wills, what divine providence is supposed to sort of like sets out to happen. And so everything that happens here isn't neutral. Everything that happens here is related to Christian time, to divine providence. And I'm speaking here of Christian time, but as we'll see, we have other examples as well. Doesn't have to be Christian. And we've been talking about sort of neutral and Christian time. So I kind of want to go back to this idea of imagining. Why is this so important to feeling like you're part of a community? And you have a quote by Tom. This is not presented as Tom Holland. This is. Just want to lay it out there. He did not start writing history books. This is a different guy. And he wrote this book. It's what?
Not finally.
I no comment. He wrote this book on Christian history called Dominion. It's quite good. It's sort of, he argues that even if in many ways that we're not aware of, Christian culture it persists today. Like, for example, even the idea of say that the meek inherit the earth, that the poor might be somehow morally superior to, say, the rich. He links this to a very specific Christian idea, and you can argue with him, but it's sort of an interesting thesis to sort of at least grapple with. But in any case, the reason I brought this up is I think this quote illustrates how time can sort of facilitate connection. And it's worth reading it a bit. No pagan ritual could rival the anointing of a baptized king. Baptism, that's the key word. The ruler who felt the stickiness of holy oil upon his skin, penetrating his pores, seeping deep into his soul, knew himself joined by experience to David and Solomon, again, figures from the Old Testament, and the Charlemagne and also other Christian kings. This act of baptism connects you to all of these figures across time. Why? Because time is Christian. Because time is moral. By engaging in a fundamentally Christian act, you commune with other people who have access to that same Christian time. And this is a Christian example, but I have examples from other cultures too. I have the Salah, the Shalat, if you're Muslim, right? And that's something that every Muslim across time does. By performing Salah, you're accessing Islamic time. Same thing with Imperial China. There's this thing called the Feng and the Shan sacrifices. And every Chinese emperor, whether you're from the Han dynasty or the Ming dynasty, or if you're like, say, a Manchu, you're not even ethnically Han, and that's itself kind of a tricky thing to say, but you would all do this. And what it encompasses is you ascend Taishan, which is the most sacred mountain in China, and you perform the Feng sacrifice to heaven and the Shan sacrifice to earth. And by doing this, again, you're joined in communion to not a Christian, not a Muslim sort of moral order of the universe, but a Chinese cosmological order where Zhongguo is the center. And so we can start to see how this is so central to a vision of the universe where you see yourself at the center, right? If you believe time is fundamentally Christian, if you believe the moral order of the universe that everyone lives in is Christian, well, Jerusalem's at the center. If you believe that the moral order of the universe is the cosmology of Imperial China, then Ming China, this landmass, is obviously the center. And it doesn't matter how you represent Japan or Korea or like the rest of the world for that matter, because they're peripheral. You live in a center. Okay, I want to pause for a bit and just sort of go back to you guys and see if that made sense, if there's any questions, because it's this concept of centrality, of moral centers is crucial to the rise of nationalism. Good? Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah.
If I make my own comments, I feel that argument makes sense, but I'm personally having a hard time to resonate with it because I do identify as a Muslim.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty like religious too. I
Yeah.
do this all and everything, but I don't personally see Mecca as this center of things or even Saudi as the center of things.
No, that's I'm glad you pointed that out. Because this is, I guess it's a bit of a misnomer to say that this is Christian or Muslim. It's Christian and Muslim before the 16th and 17th century. And again, and that's crucial what you just mentioned, because these identities do not disappear.
Yeah.
They, again, remember Nathan. The fact that he's Indonesian does not cancel out the fact that he's an alcoholic. He's still an alcoholic. The alcoholism coexists with the Indonesianness, and it's going to be the same with Islamic and Christian identity. So again, identity exists in parallel. So okay. Yeah.
Is in every map from the Arab world before the 16th, 17th century, you would find a little Mecca somewhere there. It would be very identifiable. And usually it would be around the center.
See.
So it's interesting because it's Jerusalem, right? For like Christians, but for Muslims, it's always Mecca. You can always, like, even if you can't read the map, you can kind of see right at the center would be Mecca.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So we talked about sort of time and how sort of like moral time allowed us to imagine like a center of the universe. What happened? Why did that change? Why did time become more and more neutral? And really the answer is that it just became harder to imagine yourself at the center of the universe. So around the 16th and 17th centuries, Renaissance humanism, I might be getting the dates wrong, we can look it up. Renaissance humanism at the end of like the Middle Ages swept through Europe. And there was a sort of rediscovery, and that's what Renaissance means, right? A rebirth or a rediscovery of the classical age of the Greeks and the Romans. And it's not that people weren't aware that there was a time before biblical time. What it did was that now there was a time that was sort of almost equal, if not superior, to biblical time. Because around what sort of the key, the defining characteristic of Renaissance humanism was sort of this fetish almost, this sort of glorification of ancient Greek and Roman culture. And that was such a land shift from like a world where like Christian culture and Christian identity was at the apex. These guys weren't Christians, but were they kind of smart? Or like even your Michelangelo, when you make David statue, it's like, oh, he's kind of built, he's kind of hot. He's not Christian though. I wonder what's that? Oh well, David is kind of Christian, but that's sort of the idea, right? That it's harder to center yourself. That happened across time. It also happened across space. Why? The age of exploration. And sort of, I have a picture here that sort of gets at that. This is the Spanish conquistador, Hernan Cortez, meeting the Aztec emperor Montezuma, right? And you can sort of put yourself in their shoes. You're Spanish or Portuguese, and then you set out to the New World, to the Americas, and you find all of these people, and they don't make sense. They're not Christian, they speak strange languages, they don't fit. They don't fit into your moral order anymore. Another example is Marco Polo. He travels east to the court of Kublai Khan in Yuan, in Mongol China, and he's shocked. We're not the center of the world. This is the center of the world. This is such an advanced civilization. So across time and space, it just became harder to sort of imagine yourself as the center of the universe. And this neutrality of time explains why nationalisms are plural. You might be an American supremacist, you might be an Indonesian supremacist, you might believe your country is better than everyone else, but you don't deny the fact that there are other countries. Why? Because time is neutral. The moral order does not belong to anyone. Now, let me end this section by just commenting that it's not that simple, because moral time itself is not entirely dead, even if it's not as definitive as Anderson argues it was before the 16th and 17th centuries. Because we do have examples of modern attempts to create moral time, to create sort of like a purposeful X-centric history. to borrow your terms. Marxism is a good example of that. Because Marxism tries to posit that all of history is driven and governed by what? Materialist logic, by class struggle. And that's the only thing that drives history. Nothing else drives history. In some sense, Marxism is an attempt to create a secular moral time. Francis Fukuyama, the end of history, right? All of history is moving towards liberal Western style democracy. That is also an attempt to create a moral order in time. And so even as we live in a world that's more neutral in this time sense than the one that Anderson's talking about, not entirely. And it's sort of, there's an allure to sort of creating these universal sweeping narratives, right? And that's sort of like what's always behind these attempts to create a very moral idea of time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you clarify what neutral time is?
Neutral time, yeah. So Anderson does not give like a definite timestamp, but he puts the processes that set these in motion starting in the 14th centuries, and then it just kept gathering steam across the ages. So I guess if you use historian time frames for the early modern period, so with the Renaissance and then the beginning of like as we'll see, the Protestant Reformation as well, and the Age of Exploration, that's sort of like the defining period where these trends were set in motion. And also in parallel, secularism was rising in this period, sort of challenging sort of this idea of a religious moral. Kind of. The story is always a bit more complicated than that, but sort of anchor us. That's sort of, I think, sufficient. Yeah. Is it still kind
I'm
of?
still a little confused.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can go into it. Is there sort of a?
I guess they're just like, what, like, I don't get exactly like what neutral time is, like.
Yeah.
Maybe just as an attempt to answer that, I think the example you gave at the beginning was good, where we had this time from, let's say, 50 after Christ to 500. And it's just like these singular events that are almost independent here, just happening, but without any deeper tie or any deeper goal or any deeper causality in that sense. So maybe that is a way of thinking about neutral time, is just like almost independent events.
Or maybe, for example, if you know about the Islamic calendar, the Hijriya way of dating things, it starts when the Prophet passed away. And then so now if you look at the Islamic calendar, now we're in like 1400 something, I forgot. So it's not 2025 in the Islamic calendar. Because you measure time by when the Prophet died, Muhammad died. So that's not neutral time. That's Islamic time, if that makes sense. Like even the West, AD, like before Christ and after Christ, right? So it's not neutral.
If I were to, in a way that I'm trying to understand it, is basically there will always be an X time, which is like like everything's related, so everything has historical meaning, but the neutral time is basically coming to accept that there are so different timelines, and like you have to kind of think about there's like a conglomeration of like all these things existing of one plane in some way. That's what.
I think I'm also thinking of it as like neutral time being related to like globalization, like as we like are encountering more things, like it's hard to imagine yourself as being just that one thing. It's like as you explore other things, like okay, I can't possibly be just this because there's something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, those are all very good answers and absolutely correct. And I just want to give a chance to sort of the Zoom people. Someone mentioned that sort of it's related to the transition between geocentrism and heliocentrism. So, and that's true. It's like it's sort of, they all seem kind of unrelated, but they're all sort of happening in a similar period, and they're sort of like getting at the same theme of like even if we're not making any philosophical claim as to whether time is neutral or not, at the very least, to go back to what Sebastian is saying, it just becomes harder to imagine sort of a single system monopolizing all of that. Yeah.
I have a question. I know that historians today try to change the AD to Common Era, right? So it's before Common Era and after Common Era and Common Era, but they still kind of base the Common Era on the when Jesus born. But is that not time to like neutralize the time?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I want to point out, Bernadette has a great comment here that moral time is still kind of apparent in modern maps today. The Mercator map centers on Europe, while China's official world map puts China in the center. So again, you're all absolutely right. It never really goes away. There's always this attempt to center us at something. And maybe the language of neutral time, maybe we want to kind of push back on Anderson a bit. Maybe that itself reflects something, that it's not really neutral, but we kind of have to like almost make this claim that, no, I am being neutral. Sort of, I have time, but Marxist time is actually neutral. I have Fukuyama's time, but Fukuyama's time is actually neutral. Or, and this is actually like what Marx would say, not even say neutral, it's scientific. It's scientific. And so there's always this claim of maybe we're not actually being neutral, but now we're more conscious about the need to present it as neutral and objective. Yes.
I think we should historicize the term neutral time itself, because I mean Anderson, he wrote in like the 60s to 80s,
yeah.
And so I think also this phenomenon of, or we could maybe even a bit provocatively say this fetish of neutrality is probably also, I would say, a symptom of that time of the 60s and 80s and so.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes. No, yeah, that's a really, really good point. Oh, someone else on Zoom. I remember the Al-Idrisi map or tabula. Oh, are you familiar with this, Alfia? From Balma?
Oh yeah, Al-Idrisi map, yeah.
Oh, yeah, still muted.
It's like one of the it's basically like one of the biggest and like most famous map. It was commissioned by, I think it was a Christian king, but the one why it's called Al-Idrisi is because Al-Idrisi is the one that's like collects all of it. So like this king, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, maybe it's a different king I'm thinking about, bro. Yes, King Roger of Sicily. Okay, I'm right then. So it's basically every traveler that goes through his court, they were asking, tell us more. So it's like one of the most comprehensive pre-modern maps that exist.
Okay, thank you. I just realized it's 8:30, so we need to let's just move on. Because that was just time. We still have two more. Okay, so right. So with a more neutral time, and let's put quotation marks now when we say neutral. Now that we have neutral time sort of like committed a death blow, maybe that's sort of the way to think about on these older centered identities, like Jerusalem as the center of the world, Mecca as the center of the world. That was sort of difficult to maintain, but it doesn't explain why nationalism came to take its place. And Anderson posits that the answer lies in language, and there was a shift in how language operated and sort of how societies use language that was decisive. So first we'll start with his claim that all of these sacred moral orders that we've talked about, just as each of them had centers of the universe, they all had centered privileged scripts as well. If you're part of the church, it's Latin. If you're Muslim, it's Arabic. And if it's Imperial China, it's Chinese. And in Anderson's words, these sort of languages genuinely reflected the moral order. God's language was Latin. Allah's language was Arabic. And this faced a bunch of challenges by vernaculars. Increasingly, these privileged scripts lost that privilege. One of the things that happened was the Protestant Reformation. This was sort of one of the things that fueled it. So Desiderius Erasmus, writing in the 16s, writing at leading up to the Protestant Reformation, he translates the New Testament not in Latin but in Greek. So you're already starting to see the shift. And then a more decisive earthquake happens when this guy, Martin Luther, is a German Augustinian friar. He goes up to Wittenberg, takes his 95 thesis, criticizing the Catholic Church, and hangs it on the door. What was decisive, though, was the fact that he did not write this in Latin. He wrote this in German. And there's a very specific ethos behind the Protestant Reformation that's important for this. In the Catholic Church, most people didn't have to read the Bible. You had the clergy, you had the priests to do that for you. So you just went to church and just listened to priests. And the priests, they learned Latin. Most Europeans did not speak Latin. And they didn't have to because they had the priesthood, they had the clergy. And sort of one of the ethos of the Protestant Reformation was to sort of shift that it came up with this more personalized idea of faith that was highly dependent on people actually being able to access these sacred texts, the Bible. And that's why there was a shift. There was a shift on emphasis that vernaculars are important because if we want ordinary, again, when use quotation marks because there were no Germans yet at this time, ordinary Germans, ordinary French, ordinary Englishmen, if they wanted to read the Bible, it had to be in these vernaculars. That's one element. The other element that I've highlighted here is print. This Reformation did not just happen in terms of spoken language, not just spoken vernacular, but print languages. This coincided with the invention of the printing press. And why is this so important? Why is the fact that print vernacular instead of just spoken vernacular was so important to the development of nationalism? So let's do a bit of linguistics, sort of get into this. So this is the concept of me, of I in Chinese. And there's different ways of saying this in all of the different dialects in China. Standard Chinese, it's wo. In Cantonese, it's ngo. Hokkien is wa. Shanghainese is ngo hongmu. And Hakka is ngo. So 5 different ways of saying this. But they're all represented by the same written script. Different sounds, same script. And this is why print language is so important, because print has this unifying effect. You can have all of these different dialects and you can represent them with the same script, with the same printed version of it. And Anderson has this great quote where, these sort of ideographic languages form an assembling zone where you can assemble all of these dialects. And there's sort of a hierarchy from algebra to Indonesian, where like algebra, it's like, X or addition. It's the same sign for everyone, whereas Indonesian is much more specific. And this becomes decisive for nationalism because of a phenomenon that Anderson calls print capitalism. So what is print capitalism? Imagine that you're a book publisher and you sort of want to sell your book to many people. Again, it's a book, so it's printed language. And let's say you are a speaker of Languedoc. It's sort of like the standard dialect of French. And you realize, and so this map over here sort of like highlights linguistic zones. So everything in green here are the Romance languages. And the same color, the more similar your color, the more closely related your sort of dialect is. So again, you speak Languedoc, and you're like, wait, if I print my book in this written script, it's not just the Languedoc people that can read my stuff. Maybe the Occitans, that's another French dialect, can read it too. And everyone that's similar. People who speak Italian or Spanish, maybe they have a bit of trouble, but maybe they can read some. But you already locked yourself out from where? From the Cyrillic speaking peoples in Eastern Europe and Russia, right? And you can see how these ethno-linguistic lines kind of approximate nation states, right? And again, let's go back to this idea of feeling. How do you end up feeling connected? Anderson has a great quote again. Speakers of the huge variety of Frenches, Englishes, or Spanishes who might find it difficult or even impossible to understand one another in conversation. Again, Cantonese and Chinese, you put them together, they don't understand each other. But now, because there's print and paper, you can comprehend each other. Again, wo as a symbolic sign as compared to the 5 dialects. And now you're part of an imagined community, right? Because now you're aware that, like, wait, just as I'm reading something in standard English, so are all of these people. And not only that, you learn to define yourself against other people. I am a part of this group reading English, but there exist so many other people who won't understand this at all. And that's how you start to get this idea of being part of a community. And so we've talked a bit about how this has an inherently unifying effect, but it also has a disintegrating effect politically occasionally. So I kind of want to zoom in on this part of the map. This is the Habsburg Empire. It's one of the it's one of sort of the big multilingual, multi-ethnic empires at the time. And at the time being usually lasted until the 20th century, at the end of World War I. So it's sort of one of the old sort of large classical empires. The Ottomans are another example. And notice how within the boundaries of the Habsburg Empire, you have all of these different ethno-linguistic groups. Notice again how they map out with modern nation states, right? This is Hungarian, that's Hungary. This is German, that's Austria. That's Austria. The Croats and Serbs, and this I think this was what eventually ended up being Yugoslavia. And this is sort of Ukrainian, so it's sort of Ukrainian / Russian. I'm not gonna go into that. And this basically tore the empire apart because all of these ethno-linguistic groups started claiming their own nationalisms. Same thing happened in the Ottoman Empire. And so in a lot of political entities, the effect was to disintegrate. Okay, so we talked about how baptism was a shared experience. Print consumption also became a kind of a shared experience. And I'll let Anderson speak for himself because I think this is a great quote. Hegel observed that newspapers serve modern man as a substitute for modern praise. Why? It's performed in silent privacy. Remember, it's an imagined community. You don't know each other. We're all doing this in your head. It's a very mental process. And yet you're all aware that the ceremony you're performing is being replicated simultaneously by thousands or millions of others. And not only that, you repeat it at daily or half-daily intervals throughout the calendar. It becomes a shared experience, right? We all read, Americans read the New York Times or Fox News. Indonesians, you're reading Kompas, right? You're reading the Jakarta Post, and you're aware that all members of the literate class in Indonesia are reading the same text, and you're all doing it together somehow. And there's this sort of almost unconscious awareness of it. And again, I want to juxtapose this again with the same quote by Tom Holland about baptism, right? It binds you to these people. There's a sense that, well, you're part of the same world. You're part of the same community. So but there's still a bit of a paradox here. We've talked about time. We've talked about language, but this still doesn't explain everything. I have a map here of South America. And with the exception of Brazil, all of the other nation states in South America speak Spanish. Why didn't they become part of a single nation? Why did they divide into Argentina, to Bolivia, to Venezuela? Something else is going on here that language itself is not sufficient to explain. Part of the answer lies in the fact that these borders are kind of synonymous, they're kind of coterminous with the actual borders of the provinces, the administrative provinces of the Spanish Empire, when Spain was still the dominant when they were still Spanish colonies. For example, Argentina used to be the province of Rio de la Plata, right? And so we have to look at these things called administrative bureaucracies too. Because the Spanish drew these lines where they're like, this is one province, this is another province, this is another province, and wait, the W nation states? How the hell did, like, if you're a corporate person, you know, how does the Department of Finance become its own nation? Does the Department of Human Resources become its own nation? Somehow this is happening here. So let's unpack that a bit more. Again, let's go back to this idea of a shared space. Anderson argues that an administrative bureaucracy is a shared space. How? Like, again, let's go back to the corporate example. If you're part of the same company, you know that there's a uniform ranking system, like tier 1 employee, tier 2 employee, tier 3 director. And you all know you're climbing that same hierarchical ladder, you're climbing that same bureaucratic ladder, right? Oh yeah, I accumulated these points, I kissed this boss's butt, and so like now I am going to be this rank. What's your rank? There's a shared language, there's a shared experience, there's a shared ladder, there's a shared journey. Administrative bureaucracies, in some strange way, kind of become a shared space. And just as how language is also divides you from your community and the other, right? French, English, Indonesian, Thai, bureaucracies do the same thing. if you're part of the Spanish bureaucracy, you can't be part of the French bureaucracy. And so there was a trend in early modern Europe called where states would start centralizing, where states would start creating these bureaucracies. And this was a way for monarchs who usually wanted to tame their nobles, who were kind of like often like rebelled against them, to sort of like keep them in check. States create these vast administrative bureaucracies to sort of strengthen their power. And they didn't just do it in Europe, they did it in the colonies as well, right? I'll start with the British, because they had some of the largest possessions. The British Raj had its own administrative system. So did the Palestinian Mandate. Right, they're both British territories, but they both have their own administrative systems, quite separate. And so these have their own binding effect. And finally, this also kind of links back to the language story, because states also started reinforcing administrative languages. So if you're the French king, you're like, I promote langue as the language that you have to speak if you want to be a bureaucrat with me. So that's all kind of abstract. Let me give you an example that Anderson himself gives, which I think is beautiful in highlighting the shared space. So he goes back to this experience of the Hajj. And so we're back in our territory of like sort of a sacred community. And he describes how this sort of binds people together, how this shared journey brings people together. And it's beautiful. So I think it's worth reading in full. The strange physical juxtaposition of Malays, Persians, Indians, Berbers, and Turks in Mecca is something incomprehensible without an idea of their community in some form. The Berber encounters the Malay before the Kaaba. And he must, as it were, ask himself, why is this man doing what I am doing? Uttering the same words that I am uttering. Maybe it's the Shahadat, or even though we don't have the same language, we can't even talk to each other. I can't talk to him as a person, but I understand what he's saying when you're facing the Kaaba. There's only one answer once you've learned it, because we are Muslims, right? It's that shared experience. And I would argue, and then Hamilton would argue, that administrative spaces serve the same purpose. Same quote. Let's replace a few words. Instead of Malays, Persians, Indians, and Berbers and Turks, we have Indonesian ethnic groups, the Javanese, the Minang, the Sundanese, the Manadois, and the Batak, congregating not in Mecca, but the administrative capital of the Dutch East Indies, Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. The Javanese encounters the Minang at Stovia. Stovia is sort of like the medical school of the Dutch, and it's a lot of people in the Dutch bureaucracy ended up going there to study, and sort of became this meeting ground for a lot of Indonesians, or Indians, some more accurate term at the time. And then in this case, they actually can talk to each other because they're either speaking Dutch or Malay. But it's the same thing. We're all brought together in that same journey. And that's how you sort of form this shared identity as Indonesian. And Anderson's very explicit. He calls this a pilgrimage in itself. Because just as the Malay boards a ship at maybe, what's a Malay city? Malacca. Boards a ship at Malacca, goes all the way to Mecca, and meets all of these other Muslims. So does a Javanese from Boyolali, or from any other village for that matter. He journeys all the way up the administrative ladder. First, maybe in his regency, in his kabupaten, and goes all the way to the center, eventually, as he rises higher and higher in rank. And there he meets other Indians who sort of are on the same journey, and together begin building this bond. Wait, we are kind of the same. And to give a bit of a spoiler for next week, there is also an other, the Dutch, the white man, who will never accept us, who we will always be inferior to. And that's how you end up building the sense of identity, community. So, thank you, Rama. Or thank you, Benedict Anderson. So just to summarize a bit, sort of everything that we've been talking about. So if you've been sleeping before this, just wake up for this. Again, our three building blocks of time, language, and shared spaces and experience. If you're part of, if you're a Muslim, it's universal Islamic time, and here's neutral time. But Indonesia, again, is that sociological entity moving through time. Actually, I'm not going to go through this because we're running out of time. You guys can see this. You can look at it up. You can look this up later if you want to, because we still have a few more. So let's talk a bit about history. If nations were a product of the modern era, they arose at a certain time, what came before? Nationalism must write its own autobiography. So how does it write its own biography if there was a time where it did not exist? Indonesia was, and I say political birth here because that was when we declared independence. If it achieved its political birth at 1945, what happened before? Where were all the Indonesians before 1945? How does it explain that? Right? If I want to say you're Indonesian, if I'm Indonesian, so when I ask, well, where were you? What were you? Where was Indonesia? How does nationalism explain itself? Again, if you're thinking about the biblical or like the Abrahamic tradition, they already have this sense of time, right? Based on the Old Testament. There was the Old Testament where in Islamic terminology, it's Jahiliyah, I guess that's what they do it. Well, sort of the time of ignorance before Muhammad was born, and then spread the word of Islam. And so you already have that sense, but how does nationalism sort of make sense of its missing past? And Anderson uses the word that, well, they were asleep. They were unconscious. They were unconscious. The Indonesians were there, but they were unconscious. And in 1945, they awoke from sleep. And there's this great quote where all changes in consciousness bring with them characteristic amnesias. And what do you do with these amnesias? You create narratives. You create historical narratives. Prince Diponegoro, a Javanese aristocrat rebelling against the Dutch, far way back, like 1700s or I'm really bad with times. Sometime in the past. Imam Bonjol, right, rebelling against the Dutch. They did not fight for an idea of Indonesia. They did not identify as Indonesians. They did not claim to be Indonesians. But if you ask Sukarno, what would he say? If you ask Indonesia's first president, what would he say? No, they were Indonesians. They just didn't realize it. They were unconscious of the fact that they were Indonesians. And there's a bunch of few more examples. I'll skip the first one, but the second one is sort of like kind of worth highlighting. Anderson's talking about sort of Czechs, Hungarians, and Finns, members of the Russian and the Habsburg empires, right? And a lot of the nobility did not even speak the vernaculars. They did not speak Czech. They did not speak Hungarian. They did not speak Finnish. They were speaking Russian. They were speaking German. They were speaking Latin. So how could these people end up claiming that they were actually Hungarian or actually Finnish? Again, they were asleep. They were rediscovering that something that was always known deep down. They always knew they were Hungarians. They just didn't realize it. So, we're almost there. A few more slides. Let's talk again about. So we've talked a lot about nationalism, and so I hope so far we get an idea at least of how, again, how it feels, how people came to feel that fellow national citizens were part of the same community. But most communities also inspire certain feelings. The most prominent being love, right? You care about your family, you care about your friends, you love them. Sometimes you might even be willing to die for them. Imagine communities are the same. And so nations, and this has become relevant as we talk about nationalism. Nations inspire people not just to die for them, but to kill for them as well. So how does this inspire? How do they inspire this sort of love? And Ben Henderson has another interesting answer, where there's a sense of inevitability almost with nations, where you don't choose them. And so it assumes a moral grandeur, which this is to dying for the Labor Party, the American Medical Association, or perhaps even Amnesty International kind of rival. Because you can choose to join or leave these organizations, but do you really have a choice over whether you're born Indonesian, American, French, German, Chinese, Indian? And so we end with this world where this sense of national identity seems inevitable. It becomes a global default. And think of it this way. Again, even if you don't like your country, even if you say, I wish I was born something else. I was born Armenian, I was born Russian, I was born American, I was born Chinese. You cannot escape the fact that, like, if someone asks you where you're from, you have to pull out your passport. And you have to show it in their faces. And that's what I learned. And I want to talk a bit about sort of what one of the consequences of living in such a world where national identity is a default. If national identity is a default, what happens if you are stateless? What happens if you don't? Maybe, and this will feel very timely, I hope, given things. Because you're in this weird limbo, right? If everyone's a national citizen and say you get expatriated or you get your citizenship stripped, what happens to you? And I have this quote by Hannah Arendt, which says that, well, when you lose your nationality, it means it's the same thing as being actually expelled from humanity. Why? Because what happens at court? What's the first thing that is asked when you're at court? Which law shall we try you by? American law, Dutch law, Indonesian law. And if you don't belong to any of them, as Earl Warren says, you have lost the right to have rights. People just have to try you. You're like in this metaphysical limbo. People don't know what to do with you. And sort of the specific case here, Trump versus Dulles, which is held in the Supreme Court of the United States. This was about, the ruling was about whether the US government could strip citizens of their citizenship after they committed a crime. And they ruled no. So, given all of that, and I know we're running really short of time, but I just wanted to posit a few more questions for all of you, maybe open it up to, I don't know if we still have time for discussion, but sort of the original intention was to open it up for discussion here. And just a bunch of questions to maybe get your minds going. Now, we spoke on nationalist love, and what about nationalist hatred? And if you read the article that we shared in the WhatsApp group, this is going to sort of come up, right? And again, back to that question of that was raised about, well, I'm Muslim, but I don't see myself as the center of the world. So how do these identities transmute and coexist with nationalism? And then if we can assume nationalism assumes a moral grandeur that drives people to die and kill for it, what about other identities like race and class? Do you also feel attached to that in the same way? And finally, is nationalism an elite or popular phenomenon? I think this is tricky because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I feel like most people tuning in today are at the very least skeptics of nationalism. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my sense. And yet we live in the world where I think the vast majority of humankind is not. Most people still feel this primal bond with nationalism, right? And I want to sort of unpack this dilemma because you'll often hear the refrain that nationalism is abused by the elites. And yet nationalism can be profoundly popular. How do you reconcile that? I'll do that later. But that's it. So far that's sort of, do you think you want to continue with the discussion or are we running out of time? Yeah, so that's sort of a bunch of like sort of stimulating questions, I suppose. Yeah, people on Zoom, people in class, feel free to chime in with whatever you want to say. And after this, we'll have a short discussion and also give a sneak peek for what we're going to do next week. Well, let me bring this up. Um, Masih ada. Nope.
So Derek, probably there's like this one interesting paragraphs from this book. So if people in the Zoom can see it, it's called In Search of Southeast Asia, a Modern History. So they explains about like the concept of nationalism is a bit natural because of the language being used by a lot of communities. So for example, like the Eurasian people are using Indonesian as the second language besides the administrative, like the Chinese Indonesian using it for commerce. So there's a natural sense when they begin to realize or awake from.
Yeah.
So we have something in common. It's using Malaysian language, and even Malaysian language is being used more than like Javanese language because people in the Minahasa and other island besides Java uses Malays more than Indonesia. So what do you think about this natural phenomena that awakens them? So it is not something that are ingrained, but something just happened naturally. How do you think of it?
Yeah. I'm slightly higher self-esteem than people.
First of all, Indonesia is so wide, right? I mean, like so many islands there, like 17,000 more islands, and we got like more than 1,300 tribes. I mean, I'm from Aceh, and maybe like you guys like from another tribes as well.
Yeah.
So I do personally believe that language is not, even though you already read that Thai language, and but I don't think language is the one that unites us. Even though we have this we talk the same language, Indonesian language. I think myself, Indonesian language is fabricated language. It is a Malay language that is, that
Adapted.
is used, like the book say, that was used during that era to do the commerce things. I think why Indonesia is boring is because like we got the same struggle. So the time, the neutral time of this is like we got the same struggle. We got the same, say, penyakit, which is the Dutch. Okay, the Dutch is everywhere. The Dutch is like make us like overwhelmed. Dengan kehadiran mereka, gitu ya. Jadi I think language. I mean, why I don't agree language is like what unite us, because like until this day, at least in my born place, like we don't talk Indonesian. We talk Achinese. We don't understand Indonesian language. I think I doing in Achinese language. I talk to you guys in Achinese language, but I translate it to English. I don't speak Indonesian, but I can speak Indonesian. I mean, like I'm thinking, I'm dreaming in Achinese language. So I don't mean personally, I don't believe that language is a grander reason why we are Indonesian. Yeah, more of because of the same struggle, and we got the tipping point. The tipping point is like we got this Messiah, Soekarno, with his charming words that unite us.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. One of the yeah.
I just had a question.
No, yeah. One of the proposition in this book is also like before like the use of Malay language, So these communities use their own languages. So there are no common things to fight the Dutch. So people who are going to the Dutch school only have their bubbles there and Chinese communist bubbles there. So like this natural phenomena is making them we can get independence. So
Yeah,
that's
I
like a
think
little bit of proposition on this.
I think we can see from the timeline itself. At the time, like spices
Mhm.
is like is the what to say rajanya gitu ya.
Mm.
The thing spices is the thing that makes the Dutch came make the Spanish came to us, make the other European came to us. And when at the time the one that yang punya monopoly
Mm.
the area is like Malacca in Malay area. So
Malacca trade.
when they came and they want to purchase the spices,
Mm.
they need to speak the
Mm,
language
yeah,
of
yeah.
the merchant.
Right, right.
So they learn Malay.
Yes,
They learn
that's right.
Malay. So and all the merchants, even if the merchant is Chinese, even if the merchant is
Yep.
like from Aceh or maybe from Java, they don't speak Japanese. They
Yes.
don't speak Chinese.
Right.
They try to learn Malay as well because like the market that came using Malay
Yes.
because they want the right price. I mean,
Right.
like the lower price. So they want to
Mm.
like, hey, I said with you,
Yeah.
we speak the same bahasa, right? So I think that's what happened, and we speak one bahasa. I don't know.
Yeah,
From my
yeah.
point of
That
view.
definitely makes sense. So
My question was specifically about Henderson, because you're pulling a lot of his ideas in this lecture, right? Does he put the same weight in time, language, and shared experience, or that is like, is it like there's different,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
one is more important than the other in terms of like
yeah.
a nationalism?
Yeah, that's a good question. You didn't give like exact proportions or anything. My sense of it is more so that he sort of puts them as like these are sort of like combination or combinatorial elements that you have, and you can mix and match. And in every different country, like the sort of which one is more important kind of differs. I think I'm getting the sense that with language, it was especially important in Europe. And all the other and that's and with the specific history of like the Protestant Reformation and everything that happened there. Whereas in other nations, sort of maybe other factors might predominate. I think my sense is that time feels like more like, like time was like sort of what cleared the way for nationalism. And then like what came after was like some combination of language and sort of like this shared experience. And as Naufal puts it, like in Indonesia's case, maybe language might be of secondary importance to say the shared struggle against the Dutch. And so maybe the short answer to that would be depends. It depends for each. It's historically configured.
There's one of the interesting example of this is the Arab nations. And how all of about like 22 countries have Arabic as the official language. But if you look at it, not all of them is located in the Middle East. Some of them is in Africa. Or like, for example, Morocco, for example. Or other countries like Algeria, Tunisia. So it's interesting if you look at the shared experience and the shared language, where the language is. Because for example, for Spanish, English, French, it's because of colonization, right? But the Arabs came colonization before the modern colonization exists, if that makes sense. So it's interesting.
Which slides? Okay, as you can sort of unmute and you can speak up.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I'm in Jakarta and it's noisy everywhere here. I can't find a quiet place. Uh, so I think some of you guys talk about how language is not um, how language is not big factor, or maybe it's not the main factor in deciding our nationalism, right? But I I would argue that it's not so much the de facto factor in bringing us together. It's but it's a really big factor in um, keeping us united in our nation building process. You know, we know there's an example of Yugoslavia, and there is a term called Balkanization, right? In which an area, a region, because of nationalism, they are so they are so I don't know what to call it. They are so terpecah belah, right? And examples of that is happening Europe to Africa, right? So I think bahasa Indonesia maybe not so much the deciding factor in uniting Indonesia, but it is I think in nation building process we can actually talk to each other and realize we have a common base as a nation is with bahasa Indonesia. I think that's one point that I want to share with you guys.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Esa. Let's move on to like the sneak peek for next week because it's already 9 p.m. Let's just wrap this up. But thank you so much, everyone. That was, as always, really good discussions. So let's finally turn to Indonesia itself, and let's keep in mind everything that we've been talking about so far. So, in terms of ethnic groups, it doesn't really make sense. This is there's a lot. There's a lot. So, for example, the Javanese. The Javanese make up 40 to 50% of Indonesia's population. Why did they end up joining Indonesia instead of making their own Javanese state, for example? Why did Balkanization not happen, to use Esa's term? So it's not obvious in terms of ethnic groups. Ethno-linguistic, might I add, because all of these ethnic groups speak different languages as well. Doesn't make sense for religion too. Indonesia is quite religiously diverse. Even though majority is Muslim, as Alcia is going to highlight when she starts talking about this, there are sharp cleavages and there's vast diversity in how like Indonesian Muslims practice their faith. And if you look at the so-called Malay world here, again, and this actually became a political issue in the 60s. Why didn't Indonesia merge with Malaysia? Right? You might say it's part of the Malay world. It's the same thing. Part of the answer lies in the fact that all of these countries kind of splintered along colonial lines. The territories of the Dutch became Indonesia. Of the British became Malaysia and Singapore. Singapore got kicked out of Malaysia. The Spanish was the Philippines, and East Timor here was formerly Portuguese colony. So we'll start there next week. And sort of like with this seeming paradox, Indonesian nationalism was anti-colonial in character, but somehow it seemed to be a product of that rule. And to start teasing that, we're going to try to understand how the people who first thought of Indonesia, who first felt the need to come up with this idea, felt, and sort of the psychological, the internal turmoil, the wrestling that they faced, that sort of drove them to do this. And to do that, we're going to take a bit of a break from philosophy and history, and we're going to talk about literature. So we're going to be looking into like the big novels of Indonesia. The big novelists, one of them is Mara Rusli, and another one is Pramudiana Thakur. So thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone in the Zoom. See you next week.
See you next week, guys.
Bye-bye.